Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Ariel, and to the dialogue for this joint effort as we try to discuss issues in Latin America, specifically what is our subject today, to learn more about the opportunities and what we've been able to see the last few months in terms of the use educational technology. And on the other hand, to learn more from the World Bank report that tries to reimagine connections that should exist in the educational system, and how can technology help us. As many of us who are here, we are going through extraordinary times as we live through a crisis that has impacted the educational system in an enormous way. It's the largest crisis in the last 100 years. A very long closing of schools in Latin America, and unfortunately in many areas of the region schools are still closed, in one of the deepest recessions of the last decades. It's the first double shock we've had, with an immense effect on our children. So on the one hand, this sense of urgency to try to recover and re-accelerate learning, and within that framework, think about the lessons we've learned from the pandemic. One of the lessons is that the digital gap is enormous. We have to do everything we can to close it as soon as possible. But we also have another lesson. Education is its social interaction phenomenon. So in the future, you have to combine both things, strike a balance between the best use of technology and also the human factor. It is clear for us that technology is not a magic wand, but it can be very important to leverage all the efforts made by teachers, principals to make their work more effective, and we can use it to improve and escalate the quality of support we offer teachers. To close the digital gap is a very difficult but urgent task. We often talk about digital gaps because we have an infrastructure gap, a connectivity gap, and access to devices by homes. We also have to close the digital gap in learning materials, platforms, software. We have to close the digital gap in the technical capabilities of the educational system to use the technology adequately. We have to close the digital gap when we talk about the necessary ecosystem to support the process in terms of training and logistics and maintenance of the whole system, of the whole ecosystem. So close the digital gap is complicated, but it's an urgent challenge. And we always have to rely on two main principles. Everything has to be thought in terms of the best interaction with the human factor. And the last point is equity. Technology has the potential to give the same opportunities so that all children, wherever they are, have access to better resources and to access a better education. But although that's the potential of technology, what we see nowadays is that technology is not an equalizing factor. On the contrary, the impact is the opposite of its potential. So we have to work very hard to use technology to the most as an element to equalize opportunities in the region as a whole. in a context in which we know Latin America is a region with very great inequalities in terms of income and opportunity, but they've been exacerbated with the pandemic. In spite of all the efforts made by almost all governments and ministers of education in trying to support remote education, we know it will never replace presential education, but we know, or in-person education, but it's been a better, and it's been able to be a compensation to some students, but for lower income children and young people, there's been no compensation. So the challenge that we had of a crisis in learning has been exacerbated with a crisis. So we need to close that gap urgently. The opportunity, however, is great. The lessons give us a margin for us to invest more rapidly, more efficiently, understanding better the role of the different players in this area, understand the role of teachers, parents, and ministries. The task looms large, but also the opportunity. Now, I am going to introduce my colleague, Emanuela di Gropelo, the manager of education practice for Latin America in the World Bank, and she'll give us an outlook of this complex situation in Latin America. Emanuela. Thank you, Jaime, and thank you all for the opportunity of being here. I'll try to be brief because we have a lot in our agenda and it's very interesting. I would like to reiterate the dramatic impact of the pandemic on educational sector in Latin America, mostly because of the school closings that has continued in many areas. A World Bank report that has been published shows alarming data. For example, we see that poverty in learning is increasing from 50% to more than 60%. We see that with 13 months since schools closed, and this is a reality in many countries, the proportion of young people that are under the minimal levels of education, the pizza curve, could increase dramatically and reach 80%. As Jaime said very well, we see that the socio-economic gap is getting worse. We are seeing a 12% decrease, and even greater in some of the countries. And more current data and more real data from countries such as Brazil and Chile show that these are not just simulations or models. Losses in learning are real and alarming. It is in this context that an effective use of technology can be very useful in Latin America, both for the short and mid-term and long-term. The short term, a more effective use of technology could allow us to design and implement teleeducation models that are more effective, with more involvement of teachers and parents, as students as well, and a better quality process. And this is important because what we've seen in the region is that distance education has had a very heterogeneous impact. We can use technology effectively to design a hybrid distance education. And we have concrete examples. Uruguay has a lot of experience in this hybrid model. Brazil is designing a hybrid education model using technology for the whole school day, but countries such as India and the UK have pilots with tutors using distance education. So there are several examples on the way in how technology can be useful in the short term. But beyond short and midterm, the effective use of technology gives us many opportunities to improve the educational systems beyond this situation. And we have opportunities to use technologies to cut costs, to improve learning in the long term, and to improve the management of educational systems. From this point of view, let me underscore that several countries in Latin America have implemented innovations that are very valuable, such as, for example, early warning systems for educational information, establishing platforms for adapted technology that could be very useful if we replicate them and adapt them for the midterm. Therefore, we have to start to build on these innovations, and we will be discussing some of them. As Jaime said, to implement these solutions for the short and midterm will need a closing of the digital gap. And that gap is very large in Latin America in terms of connectivity, equipment, the competence of teachers, principals, and we need to consolidate and improve the institutional capacity and the political framework. A lot needs to be done, therefore, but a lot of potential as well. I think that the report that will be submitted and the examples will be very relevant to show us this potential. Without wasting any more time, let me give the floor to Bob Hawkins, who is a senior specialist of education in the World Bank and also a leader of the technology team at the World Bank, so that he can talk to us about the main ideas about the report Reimagine Human Connection, Technology Innovation in the World Bank. Thank you, Emanuela. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm going to share my screen with a few slides. This report was prepared by a team here at the World Bank that deals with the demand of the countries in terms of how to reimagine, plan, and think about technologies. And the relevance of this framework during COVID has been even more important. It's been a way to think about the use of technology. And I have the 5 principles of this strategy. It's called Reimagine Connections, Human Connections, because the educational process is social, and it is key that technology is the one that bridges the interaction among people to improve the process. I will talk about the 5 fundamental principles. The first is to ask why. And that is fundamental because the changes we want to see in classrooms with teachers, the capabilities of the students, culture changes in the school, recovering learning when the students come back to school, those are the most fundamental issues. And technology should support these changes and educational targets. So instead of thinking about technology at the beginning, we have to think about technology in terms of education and the changes that technology can support. The second is design and act at a large scale for everybody. The 2 important points is scale and everyone. And what we learned during the pandemic is that there is a gap that Jaime mentioned in terms of access to education. And when we develop initiatives using technology, it is fundamental that we think about students and teachers who are not connected. And what we've seen is that the idea to have online learning, online activities, the multimodal idea using radio, TV, mobile phones can be adapted to these situations. And the other point is for everyone. It is very important that we think about how to use technology to personalize education to the needs of all students. Students that have disabilities, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, or students that are not at the adequate knowledge level for the class in which they are, for example. And finally, the design has to be based on the human factor so that we respond to the needs of teachers and students. And often this means more time developing projects to ensure that in the end we do respond to the needs of the stakeholders or the actors. The third principle is empower teachers. Teachers are the most important actors in the system. And we also have to think about the role, the changing role for teachers due to the changes Emanuela mentioned when we talk about hybrid learning. Teachers need to have more digital skills, but not just digital, the pedagogic skills, social emotional skills, didactic skills, because the role of the teacher is to innovate in the room. They have to be innovators. And many countries are thinking on how these teachers can be the most important actors in the discovery and implementation of innovation in the classroom. What we learned during the pandemic is that the role of the teacher has increased, and we have to think about the use of technology to reduce the administrative burden, and therefore have the teachers use their time in a more effective way geared towards learning. And the role of the teacher is based on human connections, not only connections with students, but with parents, with the community, and other actors that help to improve learning. The fourth principle is involve the ecosystem. With technology, the Ministry of Education should collaborate with other actors in the system. It can be the Ministry of Telecommunications, for example, to improve connectivity, or with universities to support with digital content innovation, or with innovators in the private sector, so as to bring the most up-to-date content and innovating content to the classroom. That's a change in the mindset, how to increase the interconnections of the ecosystem from the Ministry of Education, bringing it beyond it. And finally, it's important to use data. You have to be data-driven. We have to make decisions based on evidence, but also data has to be used in a flexible fashion to improve the interaction based on the data. And it means also a culture change in ministries of education and the system as a whole. So we're always aware of evidence, data, and aim at improving the delivery of education. Thank you for this opportunity, and in the spirit of improving and human connections, we invite you to work with us in the implementation of this work. Thank you, Bob, for this brief presentation, trying to summarize the report in a few minutes. In the chat, we have posted the pages where you can access the report in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Crisis, and we are clearly in a very deep crisis because of the pandemic. The crisis is a time of innovation and creativity. And we know that throughout the region, governments, civil society organizations, teachers have been seeking different and better ways to maintain educational services so that students can continue learning even if at a distance. And we are very, very happy to have with us a great panel who will show us some of the examples of innovation and progress, showing how technology has been incorporated to improve the educational systems and services. We'll be listening from them in this order. First, we'll hear from Ana Carolina Santos, the Director of Articulation and Support to Basic Education Networks from the Ministry of Education in Brazil. Then, after her, we'll listen to Edna Bonilla, the Secretary of Education of Bogotá District in Colombia. Then we will hear Leandro Folga, the chairman of the Ceibal Plan in Uruguay. And then to close the panel, we'll hear the Minister of Education from Panama, Maruja Gorday de Villalobos. At the end, we'll see if we have time for questions and answers. But without any more delay, I am going to ask Ana Carolina to turn on her mic and her microphone so that she can tell us about the Brazilian experience.
Estás todavía con el micrófono apagado y la cámara apagada.
You have your camera and your mic off. We cannot hear you. Your mic is muted and we cannot see you. Apparently, Anna has some technical difficulties, so while she solves them, I will invite Secretary Bonilla if she can turn on her camera and mic and give her presentation.
¿Me escuchan bien?
Good morning, Ariel. Good morning. Can you hear me well? Yes.
Pues bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I want to extend my warm greetings and gratitude to the organizers of this event that allows us to meet, learn from each other, share experiences. For given the current moment in mankind, that as the previous speakers have said, that it may be the deepest educational crisis in the last few years. And I share the idea. Crises have to lead to learning opportunities and to growth opportunities. If we don't grow in the education area, mankind will be in a great crisis. So thank you very much to the World Bank for offering this space and considering that Bogota and Colombia can contribute and also can learn from other experiences. And an admiration and greeting to those who are here with me at this panel, Ana Carolina, Maruja, Leandro. I have reviewed all what you do, and it's really wonderful. And so I look forward to exchanging experiences. It is very valuable opportunity. We in Bogota, we have an education and a learning community which is very significant. There are approximately 1.2 million students in Bogota, of which 850,000 are in public schools at the city, in the city. About 36,000 teachers and 5,000 administrative staff, and also parents who become increasingly involved in this learning process of their children. Our intervention has 3 moments. First of all, I will address this educational EdTech strategy of the World Bank and show what we are doing in Bogota, which goes very much in line of the World Bank's work. And secondly, I would like to share with you some very specific experiences of how we are making technology our own, or having ownership of technology in our day-to-day operations for the benefit of education. Before the pandemic, there were many people who said that the future of education lies in virtuality and technology, but the pandemic has shown that technology is here to stay, but that in-person education is absolutely necessary. The cost of having our closed, the cost to our children leads us to recognize that cost, but also to prepare strategies that allow us to face these costs. And technology is an additional tool for the educational process. It does not replace education per se or the management. And three, I will show a small reflection concerning this technology and these challenges. I'm a national teacher in Colombia. Those of us at the front of this challenge have to be really, we have to respond to the challenge to mankind. We have to reimagine human connections, and educational technology, EdTech, and the World Bank's EdTech strategy has really impressed us because it's based on a deep reflection and ideas about the limitations and also the great possibilities in the use of software, hardware, digital content, and information systems to improve these teaching and learning processes. We have to analyze, and we have identified a very valuable idea that says that EdTech per se in itself is no panacea. That has been our emphasis, our main point. In the report, we have placed at the core of everything the teacher, a teacher who even teaches technologically literate or not. So we have had to develop competencies, abilities in teachers, in children, boys and girls, so that they may see that technology as an enabling factor that will help them in their education. read the report developing some basic principles to cover all educational systems in that EdTech, but overall in Bogota, we are having a very rich dialogue with the World Bank to improve our educational systems. The Bogota Development Plan, called a new social and environmental contract for the 21st century. And in education, our main priority is closing gaps, all types of inequity gaps in society at large and in the education sector. And we have seen with anguish even how the pandemic has deepened many of these gaps. Out of those 800,000 students that I mentioned that are in the public education system in Bogota, there are some 45,000 students that don't have access to technology. When the pandemic started in March of last year, many children that had virtual access made greater strides than those children and youth that didn't have access to virtual systems. So we have developed some strategies allowing us to close the gaps. First strategy, we had to reach boys and girls with software and hardware, giving them access. And by 31 July, we will have reached 105,000 boys and girls, giving them, by delivering devices for virtual access. Ultimately, we have to reach the entire body of boys and girls. We have a strategy called Aprende en Casa, Learn at Home, which we have made available to all individuals, public and private schools, who would like to access this, where we use the virtual platforms. Aprende en Casa, Learn at Home has new guides, knowledge. We have created apps and different strategies to give children access. About 45% of children in the educational system have already this access, but we have learned that we could not have this solely through digital channels. So in addition to digital channels, we have a TV, radio strategy, and recognizing that in such a diverse city as Bogota, there are children that could not be reached through any of this medium, and we had to deliver them physical guides. We are giving strides in the gradual reopening of schools. Out of the 400 schools in Bogota, some 238 of those schools have implemented some in-person events, but we hope to continue advancing at the level of the 400 schools. And we have learned that we need in-person contact. We need to meet each other, but we have to continue learning at home also. So we have to continue in the virtual mode to continue strengthening all these practical learning experiences with teachers who are much more empowered and have more ownership of technology. And if we can achieve this, the pandemic will have helped us to give those quantitative and qualitative strides. And now when it comes to learning, and based on our work experience with the World Bank, we have implemented different experiences with the World Bank. I will refer to two where we have great experience, MGI, that will allow us to improve the management of education. And what have we realized also during the pandemic? Education, boys, girls, students, the subjects of education and teachers are central, at the core of the educational process, but educational management has to accompany that process. Pedagogical teaching transformation come about when we link also this with the management. The World Bank helped us in a survey of about how many tasks a teacher has. And in addition to the teaching activities, a principal has an additional 278 administrative tasks. At what time will they have to teach, and at what times will they have to address their administrative tasks? So we have to lighten these, to flexibilize these administrative tasks. We have a payroll of 40,000 individuals that whose salary we have to pay. It was impossible to think this only in virtual terms from working at home. And now we are being able to have most of these processes on virtual platforms and reduce in-person administrative tasks to a minimum. There are 4 fundamental pillars in this improvement process. Strategic planning, allowing principals time to plan the coordination, and also scalability and efficiency of processes and information management, and the other process in which the World Bank is helping us, and we appreciate this. We have been working deeply in all that has to do with assessments and evaluations. We have to continue advancing in multidimensional assessment system for the equity, the quality of education, and accreditation models that make that the grade is not the only assessment criteria for students and teachers. We need multidimensional assessment that allow us to assess how we are doing in collective leaderships, because we have to tailor this to education, because collective leaderships are the future of education. So there are enormous concerns, but we as a society want to move forward in teaching and in quality assessment, but also in all that has to do with management. And we are persuaded that learning and teaching transformation is essential to use tools, but we have to return to the core, to trying to have smiling children. Children and youth are not only the future, but the present of our society. And this has shown to us the importance of other components in the integral training, socio-emotional education, citizenship training. The empathy with students is fundamental. We can use technology for this. Yes. Can we use technology to improve our learning processes? Yes. To improve teacher qualifications and to improve training processes? Yes, but we need in-person training at schools. We need to look at each other. We need a contact between teachers and children, teachers who ask the children how are they feeling. So I feel that the challenges and learnings that the pandemic has left us are much greater than the difficulties. And the current moment allows us to be up to the challenges with empathy and stressing the importance of education. Thank you very much, Ariel. I hope I have been able to respond to the question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Edna. An excellent presentation. Now, yes, we go back to Ana Caroline. I think she has solved her technical issues. Ana,
Ahí te vemos.
we can see you.
Good morning. Can you see me? Everyone well? First of all, on behalf of the Secretary of Education, I thank you for this opportunity to be here with you and to share with you during the webinar some of the actions that the Ministry of Education and the Secretariat of Education in Brazil have been implementing in order to include technology in education. First of all, I would like to greet Edna because she has presented the experience model in Colombia. Leandro Maruja, who will also speak after me. When one thinks about the challenges, we have to think that in our Constitution, education, basic education is a guaranteed right. And when we talk about Brazil, this challenge becomes something very important and strong. When we talk basic education, we talk about 179,000 schools, more than 179,000 schools that offer basic education. And 77% of all those schools are public schools. It's a huge universe. The 61% urban and 39% in rural areas. 38 million students enrolled. So the challenge that we have in Brazil is huge. And before the pandemic, education in Brazil needed to be to advance in an exponential way to guarantee the right to learning to all these youngs. So we had already all those challenges that we were trying to overcome, thinking of strategies to, respond to the needs. And the pandemic, as it was said several times today, the pandemic showed some situations that were already difficult for us in our education system. But as Edna says, the pandemic also offered new opportunities. Pandemic, for instance, revealed the need to look for better strategies. But pandemic also allows us to reinvent many of our practices. And this is what I want to speak about today, what we have been putting together. In 2017, the Ministry of Education launched a new program. It's the program about innovation on connected education, based on 4 principles that, for us, are important to improve the use of technology in education. So these 4 principles or dimensions balance each other. The 4 are vision, planning, developing a local national strategy for education, teach, actually. Second is the training of teachers. We know that in order to improve pedagogical practice or to improve technology for teaching, the teachers need to learn it. Teachers and all those that participate in the learning process, the use of technology. So one of the dimensions of this huge program that was launched in 2017 is exactly that, to train professors and teachers and managers in terms of technology. Another aspect is educational digital tools. We know that other than diagnostic, vision, planning, and training, we need to offer schools, teachers, students, good digital materials and tools that be accessible to all of them. And the 4th aspect is infrastructure. In other words, to create conditions that all this can happen in a balanced way. So, taking into account those four dimensions, I must say that we have implemented some actions and we have reinforced others during the pandemic. In terms of planning, for instance, the ministry offers and will carry out diagnostics for the use of technology the next month, meaning we're going to try to examine the whole network of schools, 179,000 schools, and to see what the diagnostic is. What's the level of each of these schools? How do each of those schools take into account planning and the use of technology? In the general policy of the school, is there a chapter, let's say, about use of technology for teaching? And so, on the basis of this local diagnostic, school by school, how the secretaries at the state level are organizing itself through a innovation regional planning so that all these innovations can, in the end, lead to a national planning for innovation. And so we, from the ministry, the national ministry, could support the innovations that are undertaken by the network of schools. Because we think that each region, and Brazil is a very diverse country. I mean, there are regions in Brazil that where the use of technology is very mature and profound. Other regions are still emerging towards this technology. So we have also to give different types of support for each of these regions. So how these different schools in these different regions or networks, what are the strategies that each of them have to combat the pandemic and face difficulties so that we can offer them proposals and we could establish partnerships with them to support municipalities, for instance, in their planning of the use of innovation. And as we also believe, as it was said before, that culture must change. It's to change a mindset, to bring technology to education in the classroom every day. This is a necessary change. I think that we need to do that, to make that turn, because pandemic has shown us that reality. And this needs to be done very soon, immediately, if possible, so that we could try to revert all the damage caused by the pandemic. We all suffered the pandemic. We all suffered from the fact that students were not in the classroom. So for that planning, for that vision, we have a method to do it together with the technology institutions. For example, CIEP helps us to plan the use of technology. In terms of training, the Ministry of Education created a platform called AVAMEC. AVAMEC is a training of teachers and managers or administrators. We have now 2 million persons following our courses, and there is 1 million users of this platform. 138 courses for training teachers. Improvement in technology and teaching, for instance, also continual education for teachers, those who are involved in literacy teaching, the well-being of all in the school. So this platform allowed us to more quickly touch and reach these professions of education. In terms of training administrators, we have a national program for administrators in terms of cybersecurity, because, of course, we are concerned about how the data will be used or exposed and available. Very important. This year, the ministry will create spaces for experiencing technology accessible to teachers so that technology integrates the teaching practices. But to reach that point, the teachers must be allowed to try different things, and they must be able to include a link between content and strategies. So we're going to create to allow teachers to exchange these ideas and to receive training. Teachers and administrators, of course, in that realm. We work together with some universities for training. It's offered to the state level and municipal level secretaries of education, so that not only teachers but all the actors involved in education in the school be trained in terms of technology and understand the importance of technology for the learning process by the children. In terms of educational resources, we have another platform that's an integrated platform. We had different education portals. So we have merged all these portals in one, as I would call it, platform MECREG. In digital education resources are offered there. We have more than 120,000 such resources on that platform. And in terms of infrastructure, which is a great need that we have here, because there are regions where the connections are very difficult to reach. We have difficulties sometimes to reach areas like the Amazon region in terms of transportation. So we are transferring monetary resources to the schools for connectivity and for reorganizing their internal structure so that they not only can connect to internet within the school, but that could be used only for administrative ends, but that this connectivity must be expanded to more spaces. So through this supporting infrastructure, the schools will be able to have access to the internet, but in a wider way. And the connected Amazon Conectada is another plan that we support too. And all that with the intention to generalize this access to the internet so schools can use it. So through all these actions undertaken by the ministry, we are now thinking about the diagnostic and the return to the classroom in a safe way. But like any disease, we need a diagnostic and then a treatment. So we have now the plans for the diagnostic that we want to establish now. This is something of the things that we have been doing. There's a lot of work to do. There's a large number of partnerships that that have to materialize. And all the resources that we receive from our partners in development, like World Bank, are used to implement these policies in terms of education. That's what I wanted to share with you in terms of what we've been doing and living here. Challenges, costs, and other difficulties, well, we have faced them, and we work in partnership with local governments, state governments, and education secretaries. And thank you very much for this opportunity, and a good morning to all.
Thank
you, Carolina. Very interesting what you've been doing.
Now, we are going to listen to Leandro Folger from the CEIBAL plan. Leandro, thank you, Ariel. Thank you. All those that I would like to thank those that preceded me in the presentation. From CEIBAL, I will show you part of the Uruguayan experience to give you an idea and contextualize the Uruguayan educational system. Our system is similar to what we heard from Bogota. The numbers are similar. And as we heard the experience from Brazil, I understand that the scale is a fundamental aspect when we look at the contexts in which we will be thinking about educational systems in the future. But as we heard, technology has potentially the greatest impact in those cases. Differently from Bogota, 85% of our students are a public system and the rest attend private schools. Maybe you know that CEIBAL is an initiative geared towards closing the digital gap. It started in 2007, associated to the initiative A Computer Per Child or a Laptop Per Child. And since then, we've been focusing on digital policies and educational policies. And we've had several phases in its evolution, but in 2019, our plan CEIBAL was offering a device per student to all the students in public schools between 6 and 15 years of age. Uruguay in 2019 had 100% of its schools connected to internet, a great deployment that offered the country a very deep internet penetration that facilitated certain things. As schools closed, we couldn't use the connectivity in the same way. On March 16, all students were at home because schools closed, and there we saw that although Uruguay had closed the gap of accessing devices, as Jaime said at the beginning, digital gaps are multiple. And the gap of the use and quality of use became even more obvious. Clearly, on March 16, we were in a privileged position because the following week, after schools closings, we had 70% of the students connected to CEIBAL platforms, to education management systems, and that was one of the fundamental policies. Not to multiply messages and prioritize a communication channel so as to avoid what we understood were mortal blows for education, which is cutting the link between teachers and students and families. Therefore, what we observed early on is that there were a lot of students that weren't able to take advantage of the tools as well as others, as we heard. So we used additional strategies such as TV, multimedia, trying to find those students in other spaces to bring them to this priority channel that we had established, which was the CREA platform, an educational management system available for the whole system in Uruguay. Public and private schools can use this platform, which is a learning management system without any costs. We saw an increased number in connectivity, but the use of the education, of virtual education, was not equal. In Uruguay, we did not close schools for too long. In April 2020, we started to open schools, taking into account a strategy of social priorities. One of the issues that emerged when we talked about digital gaps was that although there was a connection in most of the territory, the speed of connection was not equal, which meant that the use of the tools and the learning was differentiated. So we had to generate physical packages that they could take home. They were given to the students in different fashions. We used the radio and TV because of the difference in connectivity and speed of connection. This unequal use made us work in a strategy to remove obstacles to take advantage of connectivity. A great benefit was the slow opening of schools in 2020, where rural schools were given priority. Then we had the next step were low-income neighborhoods who were not using those tools as well as other students. Then we started to remove obstacles in terms of connectivity, thinking that students might go back to schools, to their homes, if schools closed again, because in May 2020 and June 2020, we partially opened schools. This was very good. But because of issues of protocol, not all students could go to school every day. It was only after July, August that this happened. In 2021, the strategies of removing barriers started to give fruit. So what we saw was, since we saw the inequality in the use of virtual systems, we integrated a video conference software to our learning management system. Just clicking, the teachers could initiate a video conference with all the students in their groups that were already in the system, preloaded in the system, and this became very popular. The problem is that, again, connections were at home, from home, and the connectivity was very different, as well as connection speeds. During 2020, we worked to integrate video conferencing in our learning management system and to have servers localized in Uruguay, making an agreement with telecom systems so that we could open up the traffic for all schools and all students. This was an important milestone in 2021. Access to internet for education, video conferences, and in the learning management system was 100% free for all students. And so we managed to have a free system for public education, both in person and virtually. This showed that there was a growth in the use of solutions in the ecosystem of platforms of a 25%, and even more when we looked at the interaction between teachers and students and delivery of the homework, of the work that the students had to perform. The standardized test that was done in 2020, it was called Aristas. The result showed there was no loss in language in math. This is the first time that we saw this result. Good news, because we thought that because of the pandemic, the impact would be negative. Of course, we still have very big challenges. Uruguay had to close schools again in March 2021. Fortunately, we already had deployed all these systems that was escalated, reaching very high levels. 25% more use of all the Ceibal ecosystem platform using the available tools. But now, in the reopening, we still face a challenge to have a hybrid curriculum. We are launching an event with the Ceibal Foundation. We're going to have discussions about how do you see a combined curriculum? What is the future of that curriculum? How do we use technology? And what are the possibilities of learning in a more resilient educational system? At the same time, what we see for the future is that we have to be careful when with regressionist discourse. When we go back to in person, everything will be solved. The truth is that one of the issues discussed, one of the problems came from before. We know that the teacher and schools are fundamental to level the playing field for students, but we were facing problems before. We mediated everything by technology in this very negative context. It was not technology that gave us the negative results we face in education. It was a virus, a pandemic, a health situation. Technology had nothing to do with it, and we have to try. In reality, it helped us. So we don't have to think that technology gave us the negative results we are seeing. But sometimes we perceive that technology can be part of the problem and not part of the solution. So lessons learned for us. Coordinated decisions give results. Coordinated decisions, thinking about the obstacles we start facing. For those who are trying to use tools to learn and have not been able to do it, removing obstacles therefore is effective and leads to better use. The possibility of isolating a problem, identify it clearly and work on it. To give you an example, to centralize the technological supply for the whole of the public system led to cybersecurity issues that we faced at the beginning of 2020. And what we did is the whole system changed their passwords. As we heard what they said from Brazil, when we have such a large territory, to have a technological solution that quickly reaches subsystems is very valuable, as we saw. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I was able to tell you a bit of our experience. Thank you, Leandro. Doubtlessly, there are lessons learned in all countries, and I remain with video conferencing and free access. I think it's a challenge that we should continue talking about. Now I'm going to invite Minister Maruja Gordoy from Panama. Good morning to all. I can't turn on the camera, but greetings from the Ministry of Education, and let me take advantage of this opportunity to thank the World Bank for this space for us to reflect. All the countries, as we heard, are reinventing themselves to generalize the use of technology. As the colleague from Colombia and Brazil said, the most important is not to lose sight of the human interaction in the learning process, especially the value given to physical spaces. But for us, it is very important to use the pandemic as a lesson, showing the opportunities that our country faces and also the challenges we face. And we would like to thank the Education Division from the World Bank, who have been supporting us in the proposal we're going to submit here. We want you to understand our educational system. We have a total registry of the numbers that we have here, 868,000. Primary school, 95% coverage, but we see a significant drop in coverage after the 7th grade.
Because of distance and 35-40% of the population lives in remote areas. And this leads to an inequity that has a significant impact on this gap, which is not only digital but also of knowledge gap. In our country, implemented some protocols, and some students in urban areas do better than those in remote areas. Before the pandemic, we had a strategy with all this acceleration of technology, which will help us to improve our education. Technology will allow us to improve social mobility, where education is essential to improve the standard of living of individuals, especially in a country such as ours, where 40% of the population is in extreme poverty. We had real practice in a series of actions through different social actors. And so the first thing we implemented was a partnership with NGOs and universities and schools 3 days after schools were closed in the pandemic. And we implemented a system for continuous education, because we had not yet determined how the classes would be implemented, because we still didn't have a technological platform at the beginning of the pandemic, because we have coverage limitations in a country where only 58% of our country has internet coverage. So that reality would have not allowed us to reach all corners of the country, at all schools in the country. So we developed a technology-based curriculum, including some cross-cutting competencies which were not included in the regular curriculum. And that was the first way forward to generate consensuses through partnerships with universities and also radio and TV stations. And we generated for the government and the education ministry a $40 million budget to reach all users as part of this partnership that started with the pandemic. And our national universities also made available to us their educational platforms for all students and graduates, where we trained more than 50% of graduates. So we are awaiting the outcome of these platforms. So regardless of whether there was or no, regardless of the fact that during 2020 there was no in-person education, we expanded access through this platform. But you have to remember that we couldn't access remote communities. So we are continue working with NGOs and especially also with enterprises who have contributed a lot.
Temos 31% da população
coverage of the population with connectivity. So our connectivity, our coverage is quite low. And thanks to all the support we have had with bank advisors and the interagency team at the level of different agencies and entities in the government, we are moving forward, because we have learned lessons learned, and we have been able to use some support elements we have guides to be able to generate learning objectives. I want to dwell 1 minute only in this snapshot, this table that shows a snapshot of the situation of our country. That have this snapshot shows students with connectivity. With an impact in more than 1,900 education centers. We have 80 rudimentary schools without access to electricity and water, but the pandemic has led us to develop projects for the provision of basic utilities, and we are scaling up these projects to ensure that all schools have access to water for the remainder of the academic year. And we have other similar projects by collecting water to take water where there's no regular provision of water. So those remote schools will become educational centers when it comes to connectivity. Access to technology and to what is happening. So we are providing emergency access for health issues, and for us it is very important that we have a debt as a country, a debt or gap in the provision of services. So we need to close that inequality gap that impacts significantly the life of our students. We generated a multimodal platform with the Ministry of Education to access many students through that allowed us to develop this multimodal platform, developing a great facility to collaborate in the design of platforms. The pandemic that allowed us to print materials and to distribute the materials based on a priority list, and to digitize this material through the educational portal to generate different educational interaction. We have sent these materials to middle and high schools through this interaction process. Another of our great lessons is to enable the access to virtual platforms with a very low interactivity. But now we have had a good response, especially from teachers, in all having to do with the use of platforms. And we are collaborating with different universities. And we are giving the option that schools that had other platforms could also continue with us receiving our financial support for sustainability for a better educational outcome. But we have to inform and we have negotiated with telephone companies and countries so that during the first quarter and the second quarter of the year, we will be subsidizing the access to data 24/7 with access to internet pages. All that has to do with the educational area. And during this time, we have also generated practically a 10% progress in internet deployment. We are taking internet through via satellite and via fiber optics to reach remote schools. And there have been 5.5 downloads from the internet of educational material. So this process is leading us to that integration of all we have. And now our proposal. This is a great opportunity and a challenge given the pandemic, especially when it comes to the interruption of in-person learning. And so that has led us to generate opportunities to reduce these gaps to reach remote areas. So,
después de toda la historia de la deuda que teníamos con uno de los pueblos originarios,
we learned lessons with indigenous populations, and we applied these lessons also to develop the contextual curriculum for education students when there is a transition from the mother tongue to Spanish. And this generates ownership in territories. What we want is now to integrate all we have to have a proposal that enables that transformation in the educational sector in the short, medium, and long term. This has a wide scope from technology. We have good technological platforms in educational developments. Without the collaboration of teachers, a large-scale project and institutional design would not be possible. But we have considered a proposal to generate consensus with the Educational Commission. With Yale, there's a partnership with Yale, and the Commission has already adopted the first part of this project to start this regulation process and all it will imply. We are using an innovative model through a public interest agency that has private and public resources and develops competencies and capabilities in its staff separate from the political action, because we are focusing on the scalable and long-term focus to maintain this over time and not to depend on administrative closures during governmental vacation. This has been created for the Education Ministry, where management will be clue for this system that will be designed and be made operational within the Ministry of Education on an inclusive basis. This considering a public policy, considering our country as a beehive area, beehive structure, reaching the different cells, and we have to measure, monitor, and assess our results. This is very important, more than in previous policies. This entails the development of a master plan, including infrastructure, connectivity in schools, and technological devices. This is part of this inclusive focus, leading to a national plan. I cannot take connectivity to a school that has not electricity. The school needs to have solar or grid off-grid electricity. So really, we need safe and secure and friendly schools with the necessary infrastructure to be able to develop educational platforms with all the attendant there too. And we need to continue developing the teacher's curriculum. The countries, the important thing in this project will have ramifications into other plans and experiences, especially during the pandemic, where we will scale up and adapting to contexts and different territories. And the most important thing is what we promote from the ministry, that is to say, not to lose what we have gained during this critical situation. We are implementing a mixed virtual and in-presence education system using technology, but also we want to continue this human interaction. The law has different provisions.
What we want to do is to find capacities for the 21st century, working in the curriculum, in the training of teachers, perfecting the teachers' education. The microphone seems to have been turned off, Minister. The lessons learned led us to this proposal. It's a dream. We would still be discussing it at another point, but we have to work with different devices that have to be delivered, materials that have to be delivered, but as a country with a public policy that wants to have inclusive systems that will be working in scale, giving visibility to populations that require the most support, especially the children with lack of coverage, improve learning, improve reading, improve math. We hope that in 2-3 years, this new curriculum with digital competence, with greater coverage, more inclusive, and the project wants to develop in another part of the law, flexible modalities, protecting the education achieved as of 12, 13 years when children go to 7th grade. And that's when we see a great decline in coverage in these students. So a 40% decrease. It's important to work with our teachers, who are our partners, to strengthen their skills and develop a master plan for the long term. I wanted to thank the educational team at the World Bank, who has been our ally in this process, our partners, and we have a wealth of material information, and there's consensus in our legislative assembly in whatever their political party. That's not easy to get that consensus in our country, but this is something everybody has been working on, so we can generate data that are scientific, that are scalable, to close this digital gap that we face in our country. So thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask you to keep your camera on. I'm going to invite the other panelists to also do that. Leandro, Ana Carolina, and Edna. We are almost at the end of our time, but I am going to take one more minute to add something before we close. This year and a half has been very traumatic, and we face many difficult issues. And as we heard from your presentations, it's been a year of creativity, innovation, efforts. So I want to invite you in 30 seconds to tell us what change do you want to see in education post-pandemic based on what you lived this year and a half. I think that's something we can offer our participants, a sign of hope, so that the sacrifice undertaken by all the actors in this period to maintain it, the educational system working, is not lost. In 30 seconds, what change do you want to see in the education of our countries in the post-pandemic period? Minister will give you the floor first. In 30 seconds will be hard, but I would say that we should integrate technology with in-person learning. That's important. Another important is to be more humans, more relevant, and understand what's happening in the educational context. And through technological and human integration, education has to be more relevant for the life of every student. Thank you, Leandro. I share what has been said, and I would add that I would like to see the visibility, the importance of educational systems in our countries, that it be maintained and that society understands it's a task for everyone. It's a priority. The logic of innovation, as we've seen in other areas of knowledge and other areas of the industry, remains in education, that has arrived to stay. We need to have a continuous innovation dynamic in the educational system. Thank you. Ana Carolina.
I would like to agree with what the others have said, to allow for the strength shown by technology, that it can remain, that it may be permanent, so that we can combine education and technology in products of quality that we give to our students. That's a challenge.
Edna,
finally.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ariel. I would like the society to understand and that they appropriate the fact that education transforms society. And for us to transform society, we need the commitment of teachers, of families, working for children, for young people, and that managers and those who are in these positions, which are difficult, should understand that every decision we make will be impacting the smile of a girl, a boy, that will be impacted by our efforts. So education has to be a priority in our society. That's our challenge. Well, thank you all. I believe that it's important that during these difficult times when suffering has been so great, that we look at what has been positive, at the energy, at the commitment that you all demonstrate. And we should use it as a platform for the transformation that we need in terms of the quality of the education for the future of these children. So thank you very much on behalf of the Dialogue and the World Bank. I'd like to thank all panelists, all participants, and we continue with our commitment to this task, and I will see you soon. Thank you.